Sometimes when we're working with wood, we need a scrub plane to rough down the surfaces, to take off the high spots, to develop the surface, get it ready for smooth planing. And we use a scrub plane for this. And scrub planes, to buy a specifically made scrub plane, there is a very minor advantage to having an engineered scrub plane. But you can make a scrub plane from just a regular No.4 Stanley, or a 4.5, but a 4 works best. And what the difference between this and, say, a regular Stanley or a regular plane is this. Can you see on this one I have a straight iron in here, and this one I have a convex edged along the edge. So it has a camber on the whole length of the edge. That's the difference between the two. So one is used to create a flat surface, but this one we're reconfiguring it to make so we can scrub off the surface and remove all the high spots, get the rough down, ready for smoothing. But also I use this sometimes if I've got a table that I'm doing a restoration on, and part of the original table may have had the undulations from hand tool work from 1700. I would use this plane to replicate that. So let me show you what we do and why we do it and explain it. So here I've got a regular square edged iron. It's just a second-hand iron. You can have this original plane with its square iron, and you can take the iron out and have a second iron and just create a special iron just for scrubbing. So this would be great to do that. So this one's got the bevel already cut on it, but it has no camber. It's dead square. I just strike a line down the center of a piece of card like this, and I set my compasses to about 7 inches. You can go more and you can go less. This one I've got at 7 1/8, which is the radius that I find works just fine for me. So here on the center line here, I just strike an arc here, and then I'm going to cut this arc just with my knife like this. And this is not an exact science, as you can see. Oh, it looks pretty good to me. So then place this, make a center line on your iron. You don't really have to do this. You could just place this on here and just eyeball the radius. So I think I'm about where I want to be. I'm leaving this away from the edge by about 2 millimeters. And I've centered it on the iron, and I've got a Sharpie on here, and I'm just going to go around that radius there. So it's half on the paper and half on that. And that's going to give me the guide I need. I don't have to take the line out. Can you see that now? So I'm going to grind this on the grinding wheel. So all safety precautions, put your safety glasses on, put your respiratory mask on, whatever you need. I've taken the visor off here so you can see exactly what we're doing for this. I've got my cooling water here. It's just a tin can with water in. There are my plates for refining the bevel. So let's go to the grinding wheel now and see what we can do to refine this edge. The only reason I'm going to the grinding wheel is you can't really file this. It's a tool steel, and it's probably going to be too hard for most files. So we're going to grind it. So I'm going to go on the wheel. So I take the radius first here. I don't really want to overheat my steel, so I keep plunging periodically just to keep me so there you can already see I've got most of my radius now. I still have a thicker edge here and here, and I'm right near the edge there. Wherever you get near to the edge is going to be where the fastest heat will change it. So I'm just taking a little bit more. So I'm at my radius. Now I'm going to take the corners off. I don't want these to dig in when I'm using the scrub. So I've taken the corners off. Now I'm going to get my radius here. So you can see it's starting to take shape. Keep plunging. Don't let the heat build up. And now I'm getting into my continuous arc. So you can see the bevel, I think now. You see that? This is where you're going to get the biggest build-up of heat is going to be right on this corner. It doesn't really matter. As soon as you plunge, it's going to reharden that, probably. So it's developing a burr on this surface. When I get to the edge, it'll develop a burr on this surface, and I know I've reached the edge. I've got a burr on the top side here, so I know I've reached this edge now, so I don't see any light shining a little bit on this edge here. So that's got my bevel where I want it to be, and now I'm ready to work this on my stones. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go to the diamond plates and I'm going to refine the edge and sharpen it, and that will be me ready to work on the plane itself. When you've got your iron ground, like I've got this one, I've got this ground now. I think you can see this here. I've got a fairly low heel on here, but right now near the edge there, I'm probably somewhere around 30 degrees. It's a good idea to check yourself and make sure 30 degrees is optimal. It's perfect, really. You don't want too shallow an angle on a scrub because it hits the wood quite hard. So right in here, right at the very tip, you can see I've taken the heel off, and but right at the very tip, you can see I've got almost like a secondary bevel. The first 1/8 of the iron here, 3-4 mil, is slightly steeper. But when I start to meld those two angles together, I create a camber. I create a camber this way, and then I've also got my camber this way. So I'm using diamonds because diamonds are forever. They last a very long time, and they work so well on sharpening all cutting irons. I love them. So what I'm going to show you here is a couple of methods that I use. I would probably use the figure of 8 because I'm so used to it. So watch what happens. I drop my iron on here. I push forward, lower to the outreach and back in. So in the configuration, I do this figure of 8. Some people don't like it. I know Joseph prefers his method, which is this way. You go on here and you just push forward. And you work on the tip at 30 like that. And then you keep dropping your hand with each stroke and working back to the heel. And that gives you a very strong bevel too. So can you see now we're getting rid of some of the coarse grinding from the grinding wheel, and we're working to the edge. I can feel a burr all along the edge. So I keep going here until I'm satisfied. Then I go to this one and do exactly the same. So I'm starting at 30 here, and then I'm dropping my hand till I'm back onto the rear end of this cutting iron. So I've got a burr all the way along here. Same here. Now I could do this, like I've said before, I could just go in and be wallowing the cut like this, using the full width of this sharpening plate, because you don't want to wear your diamonds unevenly. So figure of 8 for me, I love it. So it means it's cutting on both the forward stroke and the backward stroke. And there I think I'm pretty much ready for removing the burr. The burr is on this side, so I don't need to go here unless this isn't flat. If this isn't flat on this type of a plane, it's not so critical because we're not really relying on the cap iron as a joint venture of tensioning so much, because this is actually going to be quite a distance away from the actual cutting edge by the time we're finished. So I'm grinding off this face. I want to see what I've got, and you can see I've got a high spot and a high spot here. So I'm going to go to this one, and there's one thing that I do on my scrub planes that I like. So now I've got down to the cutting edge. I have a slight hollow here that's not going to affect it here in here, but I am down to the cutting edge. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way back to this fine stone, and I'm going to lift up just about 1/8, and I'm going to rub the main center part of the iron, avoiding the edges. And what that gives me, it gives me a different angle of presentation. Can you see that if I wiggle it around a bit? So I've got a slight back bevel, which is often called a York pitch, but I've done this on this one. I need to do a little bit more here, because that gives me a strong presentation to the wood, but it also presents it at an angle that's less likely to tear into the grain. So that's what I do. Now, generally for scrubbing, using as a scrub plane, I have a burr on this side. I would probably just leave it on because it's going to break off. But if you want to, you can go the whole hog and go to a strop like this. Just a piece of leather adhered to a piece of wood. So this is just buffing compound on the surface of the leather, and then I just use the heel of my hand in here really hard and bear down all the way, working that radius, just pressing where I need to, about 30 to 40 times, just to get this tool ready to go. Not really necessary for a scrub plane. A scrub plane you could even do just at 250 grit and it's going to work. It won't create a dead smooth surface, but it will hog stuff off. So look what we got now. There's my polished bevel. And so I just have this one face to do, and that's just purely to break the burr, really. And that's ready to go. And let's see what it does. Now we're going to work on the plane now. I want to try and work on the plane a little bit. Get rid of this. When we put this in the, when we're loading this, go across the iron like this, bring it past the front of the cap iron, like that, turn it around. Now let's take a look at this point here. Can you see, if I leave the cap iron like this, where the corners are not catching, I have this huge gap between the cutting edge. That doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter if I was 1/4 of an inch away from the cutting edge. It wouldn't matter in the cut itself. It's not going to really affect the cut. Where it will affect the plane, though, is when you load it in the plane, the protrusion through the sole is massive. Can you see that? And the problem with that is it's too big of a cut for one thing, But the problem is when you pull this, when you withdraw the iron to bring it back up out of the throat like this, you still have a big protrusion. So you have to get the cap iron nearer to the foredge of this new shape. So what I'm going to suggest you do is going to be right on this. Can you see here I have about 2.5 to 3 millimeters of surface on the inside of this edge. I can file that. I can file this now here on these outer edges like this. That'll get me about 2 millimeters closer in without affecting the functionality of the plane. And now you can see again, I hope, right here, you can see I've taken the corners off here, and that's going to help me to get my iron really much closer. Just show you here without the screw. So that's getting me much closer into the edge. Can you see now I'm only about 2 or 3 mil from the cutting edge. So reload this way like this, past the cutting edge, and then slide it up here. And actually the cap iron can even protrude slightly past the corners if you want it to. And the plane will work just fine. So there you have my plane iron is set. When I load this in the plane now, I haven't refined this throat yet. So if you're using your plane as a smoothing plane, you're going to keep using your plane as a smoothing plane, you won't refine the throat. You'll just have to take lesser thick shavings off. Pull this iron up and then lock down like that. And now I've got my iron is completely withdrawn. It's not showing at all through the surface of the sole. Now I'm going to put this so you can see the first level of protrusion right there. So you can see right in this middle here, you can see, I think, the iron. Now by advancing this, I close up. Can you see the distance in the throat here is about 1.5 mil. So if I advance this, it closes up that throat. So I'm going to take a little bit off the front of this throat here in a slight round just to open up the leading edge so that I can take off a thick shaving if I want to. And how I do that is I just use a flat file. You can use a part round file if you want to, but let me see, how can you see this? Make sure that you've got this hole clamped in the vise, not these wings. You don't want the wings because it'll break them, like this. Then just take your file right into the throat. Not too much. Remember, this cast iron will file very rapidly. It's not like steel. So just file a midsection like this. And then I'm going in on the back edge just to give an exit from the hole. A little bit of sandpaper just around that leading edge there. Get rid of the burr. And it doesn't matter if the sole's flat on a scrub plane. So if you do have an old plane, you've picked one up on eBay, a second-hand shop, or a flea market, you don't need to flatten the sole for a scrub plane. I've got my plane loaded with the plane iron, cap iron set, everything, and the distance between the forepart of the plane and the actual cutting edge is just fine. But if you get yours loaded and you find it's too tight to that forepart of the plane, what you have to do is you have to adjust this thing we call the frog. And how you do that is you slacken these two screws here. These are set screws. Right. So with those two, you don't have to slacken them a whole lot, just enough to move it. Then you go in the back of the plane here. There's a set screw back here that adjusts the frog backwards and forwards. So if I turn this clockwise, it's going to move the whole of the frog forward. That's going to close up the distance between the cutting edge and the forepart of the plane. That means I have to take a smaller shaving. When we're using the plane as a scrub plane, we want to take off fairly heavy, thicker shavings. So we back this counterclockwise. That brings the frog back, but you can't go too far back because the bevel of the blade will catch on the sole of the plane and it'll cause the iron to belly in there. So you can only go a certain distance back. So I'm going to show you what I mean. There's a slight step in here between the frog on this type of plane. This is a Bailey pattern plane. There's a slight step between here and here. Can you see that? So when you put the iron in, sometimes it catches on the back. So I've not taken it back too far. I'm going to cinch these two down. So I've opened mine up quite far, more than I would normally. Load it in the plane. Wiggle this around, wiggle this lateral adjustment lever around. Now that's not locking down. That means, see that? Before it was locking down and now it's not locking down. So I'm going to take this out just a bit because I'm pretty sure what's happened is I've gone too far back so the bevel is catching on that back of the frog. So I'm going to move forward just slightly. Half a turn on that screwdriver will do it. I'm glad this came up because no, that's still a little tight. Well, let me slacken here. Okay. And now I feel for it. It's moving very smoothly, so it means it's resting on the bed, which is this part here. It's resting on the bed of the frog nicely. So it's moving freely. If it's not moving freely, usually you've created some tension by moving the frog too far back. So that gets rid of that. Let's try it. Piece of wood, piece of pine maybe. This will work. So I'm going to back the iron off so I'm not taking a massive shaving. Slightly, ooh, look at this. Beautiful. Wow. Knots and all. So you can see how this would work. Now, I'll show you, maybe you can see the surface. Can you catch the surface on there? So we've got this undulating surface, so if you were making an old kitchen table, it would work perfectly for that. But now you can see how you can alter your setting, and you can probably hog off some fairly deep shavings. So even on the hard knots there, right at the beginning and the end. So there we've got it. That's our scrub plane, and we can take down material very rapidly. We'll take it down more rapidly if we're going tangential to the grain like this, which is what we do a lot. Take down the high spots, and then come in with the longer strokes here, in and out. And that's how a scrub plane works. So we'll be working on some other projects using a scrub plane, but that's how you fettle your plane for removing stock rapidly.